The kingdom of Judah had just lost a king to a conspiracy, and the people did something unusual. They skipped the natural heirs brothers and placed a 16-year-old boy on the throne instead. His name was Uzziah, though some scrolls call him Azariah, and nobody agrees on why he carries two names in the same book of the Bible. He was crowned in a palace still stained by his father's murder, surrounded by nobles who expected him to fail, or worse, to be controlled by someone else's hand. Instead, something happened that the historians of Judah struggled to explain for centuries. A teenage king began making decisions that outclassed rulers 3 times his age. He sought out a man named Zechariah, a teacher who understood the visions of God, and he built his entire reign on that man's counsel. As long as he sought the Lord, the record says, God made him prosper. But prosper is a mild word for what actually happened next. He marched south against the Philistines and tore down the walls of Gath, Jabneh, and Ashdod, cities that had stood for generations. He built new towns in Philistine territory, planting Judah's flag on land that had never bowed to Jerusalem before. Merchants traveling through Jerusalem's markets began carrying stories of the boy king back to their own countries, stories that grew larger with every border they crossed. God helped him against the Arabians living in Gur-Baal and against the Munites, a desert people almost no modern reader has ever heard of. The Ammonites, watching a teenager dismantle their neighbors, decided the safest move was to pay him tribute before he turned toward them. Word of his name spread all the way to the border of Egypt, an empire that rarely paid attention to small kingdoms like Judah. But Uzziah wasn't only a conqueror. He was strangely also a builder obsessed with water. He dug numerous wells because he had large herds, both in the lowlands and on the plains, land that had been useless without irrigation. He loved the soil itself. The text says he had farmers and vine dressers in the mountains and in the fertile fields because, in its own words, he loved the soil. In Jerusalem, he built towers at the corner gate, the valley gate, and at the turning of the wall, fortifying the capital like no king before him. He built towers in the wilderness too, far from any city, and carved cisterns into the rock so livestock could survive in places water had never reached. Shepherds who had once avoided the wilderness south of Judah because of raiding tribes now grazed their flocks near towers Uzziah had built specifically to protect them. Then came the army. He organized a trained fighting force of 3,500 men, broken into units under 2,600 chief officers. He didn't just gather soldiers, he equipped them. Shields, spears, helmets, armor, bows, and slingstones, all prepared under royal supervision. And then he did something no army in that region had done before. He built machines, invented by skillful men, mounted on the towers and corners of Jerusalem's walls. These machines shot arrows and hurled great stones at any enemy approaching the city, a kind of siege technology centuries ahead of its time. His fame spread far, the record insists, because he was marvelously helped until he became strong. Read that sentence again. Marvelously helped until he became strong. The wording itself seems to be warning us of something. Neighboring kingdoms began sending envoys to Jerusalem not to threaten war, but to study how a nation this size had managed to feed, arm, and fortify itself so quickly under a ruler barely out of his teenage years. For over 50 years, Judah had never seen prosperity like this. No famine, no successful invasion, no internal collapse. Historians who study this period note something unsettling. Almost nothing is written about how Uzziah personally felt about his own success. We know his achievements. We know his walls, his wells, his armies. We know almost nothing about what was happening inside the mind of the man who built them. And then, in a single verse, the story turns completely, without warning, without transition, the way a scroll suddenly changes ink color. But when he was strong, his heart was lifted up to his destruction. Nobody explains what lifted up actually looked like in daily life. Was it arrogance in council meetings? Was it something he said to his own priests? What we do know is where it led him. Through the doors of the temple itself, into a room he had no legal right to enter. Uzziah walked into the sanctuary of the Lord to burn incense on the altar of incense, a task assigned exclusively for centuries to the descendants of Aaron. Not the king, not the richest man in Judah, not the most powerful general. Only the priests of a single bloodline were permitted near that altar. Uzziah, king of a nation, holder of an army capable of leveling cities, decided that this one rule did not apply to him. Some scribes who recorded these years later wondered in private commentaries whether any king could survive 50 years of uninterrupted success without eventually believing the success belonged entirely to himself. Azariah the priest followed him in, along with 80 other priests, described in the text as courageous men. 80 men, unarmed, confronting a king who commanded hundreds of thousands of soldiers. Think about what kind of courage that required. They told him plainly, "It is not for you, Uzziah, to burn incense to the Lord, but for the priests, the descendants of Aaron, who are consecrated to burn incense. Go out of the sanctuary," they said, "for you have trespassed, and you shall have no honor from the Lord God." A king had just been told, inside his own temple in front of witnesses, to leave immediately or lose his honor forever. Uzziah's reaction is where the story becomes almost unbearable to read. He became furious, not embarrassed, not repentant, not humbled by 80 men risking their lives to warn him. Furious. He had a censer in his hand, the very instrument meant only for consecrated priests, still gripped tightly as his rage grew. The golden altar of incense stood only a few steps from the veil, separating the holy place from the presence of God himself, a distance no king had ever been permitted to close alone. And while he was raging at the priests, standing beside the altar of incense inside the house of the Lord, something changed on his face. Leprosy broke out on his forehead. Not his hand, not his arm, not his chest, his forehead, the most visible part of a human body, in front of 80 witnesses. Azariah and the priests looked at him, and the text says plainly, they saw that he was leprous. They didn't wait for a diagnosis. They didn't debate what they were seeing. They thrust him out of that place immediately. Even Uzziah himself, the same man who had refused to leave moments earlier, now hurried to get out on his own. Why the sudden change? Because the record says the Lord had struck him. No prophet needed to interpret the event. No debate was necessary among the priests. The connection between the sin and the mark on his skin was immediate and undeniable to everyone present. In that instant, according to the account, everyone standing near the altar could see it happening in real time, not a rumor spreading later through the city, but a transformation witnessed directly by 80 separate pairs of eyes. Leprosy in that era wasn't just an illness. It meant permanent exile from the temple, from public life, from the community itself. A king who built towers, walls, wells, and an army capable of terrifying every neighboring nation was now unable to enter the house he once thought he could walk into unopposed. King Uzziah was a leper until the day of his death, the record says, and he dwelt in a separate house, isolated from his own palace. His own son, Jotham, took over the king's house, governing the people of the land in his father's place. Think about that arrangement. The most successful king in generations was alive, but his own son was already ruling in his place because the father could no longer even enter his own throne room without violating the law. No servant could touch him casually. No public appearance was possible. No priest could allow him near anything sacred again. For years, maybe decades, the man who once made Egypt take notice of Judah lived quietly, isolated, marked, waiting. Ancient historian Josephus later added a detail not found in the biblical text itself. He claimed an earthquake struck Jerusalem at the very moment Uzziah was struck with leprosy in the temple. Whether or not that detail is accurate, it shows how deeply this event unsettled generations of readers long after Uzziah's death. Modern scholars still argue about the actual disease behind the word translated leprosy. Some believe it wasn't Hansen's disease at all, but a different skin condition entirely. What nobody argues about is the timing. It appeared instantly, visibly on his forehead, in the one location no crown could ever hide. Why the forehead specifically? Some ancient commentators note that the forehead was where the high priest wore his golden plate, reading, "Holiness to the Lord." Uzziah had tried to take on a priestly role that wasn't his, and the mark of judgment appeared exactly where a priest's sacred symbol would have been worn. Nobody in the biblical text explains this connection directly. It's a detail readers have noticed and debated for centuries without a definitive answer. When Uzziah finally died, the writers of Chronicles made a decision that speaks louder than any description of his prosperity. He was buried with his fathers in the field of burial, which belonged to the kings, for they said, "He is a leper," not inside the actual royal tombs, near them but separated, because even in death, his condition kept him at a distance from the kings before him. 52 years of rule, 52 years of walls, wells, victories, and inventions, reduced in the end to a burial site chosen because of a single moment of pride. Isaiah the prophet marks his death as a turning point in Judah's history, writing that, "In the year that King Uzziah died, he saw a vision of the Lord in the temple." The same temple Uzziah had been forbidden to fully enter. The prophet saw the throne room Uzziah once tried to control by force. There's a bitter irony buried in that detail that ancient readers surely noticed. The king who tried to seize priestly access to God's presence never returned to it, while a prophet did, in the very year of his death. Historians studying Judah's kings often call Uzziah's reign one of the most successful in the kingdom's entire history, right up until its final chapter. Military historians point to his siege machines as one of the earliest recorded uses of mounted defensive weaponry anywhere in the ancient Near East. Agricultural historians point to his wells and irrigation systems as evidence of a ruler who understood infrastructure decades ahead of his neighbors. And yet none of that survives as his defining legacy. What survives is a single afternoon inside a temple, a censer in his hand, and a mark on his forehead. Why did God choose leprosy, of all possible punishments, for this particular sin? The text never gives a direct explanation, only the consequence itself. Why did it appear immediately in front of 80 witnesses, rather than gradually, privately, ambiguously? Nobody has offered a fully satisfying answer. Why did his own son take control of the kingdom instead of a regent or council? The Bible simply states it happened, without commentary. Some later rabbinic traditions suggest the earthquake mentioned by Josephus was connected to a prophecy from Amos, who spoke of an earthquake in the days of King Uzziah, years before this event occurred. If that connection is real, it means a warning had existed long before the moment in the temple, one nobody had connected to this specific sin until much later. Was Uzziah aware of any such warning when he picked up that censer? The text gives us no window into his private thoughts that day. All we're shown is the external sequence: pride, defiance, anger, and then a mark appearing on skin that had never shown a single blemish through 50 years of unmatched success. For a king who built towers to defend against enemies from without, the danger that finally ended his public life came from an impulse within his own chest. The 80 priests who confronted him are barely named in the record, remembered mostly as a number, yet their courage is the reason we even know how this moment unfolded. Had they said nothing, had they simply allowed the king to burn incense uncontested, would the outcome have been the same? The text doesn't allow us to know. What it does show is that the moment they spoke, the moment they resisted, is the exact moment everything changed on Uzziah's face. Judah would go on to have other kings, some faithful, some disastrous, but none combined 52 years of external triumph with such a private, sudden collapse. Even now, historians and readers debate what exactly Uzziah believed about himself in that final moment inside the sanctuary. Did he think his military victories had earned him the right to bypass a law given centuries earlier to a different family entirely? Did he believe his relationship with God was strong enough that the ritual boundaries simply didn't apply to someone who had done so much for the kingdom? The text never explains his internal reasoning, only his refusal to leave, and the anger that followed the priest's warning. That refusal is perhaps the most human detail in the entire account. A man confronted with the truth, choosing rage over retreat. Every wall Uzziah built still stood strong the day he died. His towers, his cisterns, his defenses, none of them crumbled alongside him. It wasn't a foreign army or an internal rebellion that finally reached the man history called one of Judah's greatest builders. Pilgrims who once traveled to Jerusalem specifically to see the king's new towers and machines now traveled instead to catch a glimpse from a careful distance of the isolated house where the great builder lived out his final years. It was a single decision made inside a room he had no right to enter, that no army and no wall could have defended him against. Coins and inscriptions bearing his name would later surface centuries after his death, proof that even without full access to his own temple, his reign left physical marks across the region that outlasted every dynasty argument that followed him. 2,700 years later, readers still return to this account asking the same unanswered question. Why did success change him so completely? And still, no historian, no rabbi, no theologian has produced an answer the text itself confirms as final. All that remains is the record, a teenage king who became one of the strongest rulers in his nation's history, and an old king who died separated from his own throne room. Did you know this story?